Hi everybody, Sharyl Attkisson here. Welcome to another edition of Full Measure After Hours. Today there's a growing movement to remove fluoride from public drinking water. It's gaining steam fueled by modern research and safety concerns. I'll be speaking with Surgeon General Dr. Joseph Ladapo of Florida, which has now banned water fluoridation. Water fluoridation dates back to the 1940s, and I learned a lot researching this story. Actually first reporting on fluoride a couple of years ago. The chemicals used are potent toxins that, believe it or not, come from industry waste like aluminum and phosphate fertilizer plants. Factories once released the waste into the air and water, but when health concerns put that to a halt, the industry began selling the toxic waste as fluoride components to add to public water to figure out how to dispose of the toxins, but also make money at it. There's a long history linking fluoride to health problems, dismissed as a conspiracy theory for decades by propagandists, which was picked up uncritically by many in the media. Well, things have flipped a little bit. The overwhelming scientific data over the years has become impossible to ignore. Adding to the fire, a judge's order for the EPA to address added fluoride as a toxic substance for the first time and mitigate what the court has found is an unreasonable risk to children's IQ. In January, Melbourne, Florida became among the first cities in Florida to stop fluoridating its water supply. I visit that city as part of my report on the controversies Sunday on Full Measure, November 16th. Not long after Melbourne made its move, the whole state of Florida banned water fluoridation. In today's podcast, I speak with Florida Surgeon General Dr. Joseph Ladapo. If you had to, before we dive in, finish this sentence in just a line or so, what do you think it is that many people don't know about fluoride?
I think it's just how harmful it can be. In addition to whatever protective effects it has on teeth, just how harmful it can be. I mean, it is a poison, and folks don't know that. Most folks don't know that.
And when did you come to learn, is this something you have been thinking about for decades and knew as a doctor, or is this something you've learned about more recently?
It is a good example of why it's important to pick a good partner. And people say behind, every great man, there's a great woman, and behind every great woman, there's a great man. And I think there's so much truth to that. So my wife was actually the first person years ago to tell me she was concerned about us using fluoride for our kids. And, my kids now are 12, 8, and 6. But a few years ago, 5 years ago, they were smaller. They were much younger, and we were in that period of time too, where, for many families, they move from, say, fluoride-free toothpaste to we're going to start using a little bit of fluoride in the toothpaste for Junior, and making that transition. And Brianna had concerns about it, and and I looked a little bit into it. I was very busy at the time. I think it was actually probably around the time I was starting this job in 2021. And I looked a little bit into it, and I wasn't able to get anywhere. I kind of looked into it, but I just really couldn't find anything that pushed me one way or the other. So we sort of split the difference, and, we had both types of toothpaste in our houses, and I don't even remember whether we were using one like for at in the morning and another in the evening. But she had this concern about it, and she continued to express it. And eventually all we had was, she was like, "Honey, I don't want us to use this for the boys." And so that's all we had for them. And, and I'm like very busy. We take them to the dentist every 6 months. So I was like, all right, I'll just, I can't deal with this or engage in this right now. And of course, one of the sinister things about the current state of things is how how difficult it is to actually get accurate information about scientifically controversial issues. Like literally, if you were an alien and you just arrived here and you Googled COVID-19 vaccine, all these headlines about, how safe it is and how effective it is, that's all you'd see. And heaven knows that's not the truth. Like on the ground, the fact that it's just widely recognized by many people, and still not enough, but by many people, how terrible these products are. You can't get that from a surface investigation. And that was the case with fluoride too. And that's getting better, thankfully, to the waves that were made in Colorado, the things we've done in this state, the work that other people have done. But that was the issue. I looked a little bit, I wasn't able to dive deep, and it seemed like, I'm not sure that there's a problem here. And then there was this federal ruling, this federal judge, with this case that I think Michael Connett had been leading for years, finally reached the conclusion that, hey, EPA, you need to exercise your regulatory authority in this area. You're not doing enough with water fluoridation. The risks, or even I don't remember exactly how he put it, but basically it was something to the effect of even the appearance of risk, or, what could be reasonably interpreted as being a real risk, just has not been met with an equal level of exercise of your authority. So you need to do that. And that was basically his ruling. And at that point, I just realized, okay, I can't just sit on the sidelines here. We have this federal judge who's made a ruling, and here I am still using fluoridated toothpaste, and I just don't. I'm not well enough informed about this. So that led me to look more into
What would you
it.
say is the most compelling piece of evidence you saw that turned you around on fluoride and the possible risks?
So I would say, because it's very tough, and people who do research, and one of the advantages that I've had is that I actually came from background in research. I took care of patients at UCLA and NYU, but I also did a lot of research. I had a handful of NIH grants. So I've really been I've had my development, my formation in research. And when you look at the studies individually, some of them have very good study designs, but a lot of them have weaknesses, because we're not talking about randomized clinical trials here. We're talking about study designs that are more vulnerable to bias than the randomized clinical trials. However, still, when looking at them, what is striking is that the vast majority line up on this side of fluoride potentially being harmful. And the additional piece of information is that not only do you have congruence across many, many studies in different countries, but there's also a presence of a dose-response relationship. And that is, you always have to pay attention when you see that.
Can you explain in really simple terms what a dose-response relationship means when it comes to fluoride?
Absolutely. So let's say if we were doing a randomized clinical trial and we randomized some families to drinking fluoridated water and other families to drinking fluoride-free water. And, we showed up 5 years later and we did some tests on their kids. That would be a great study design. That does not exist, not really feasible or practical. However, with observational studies, we sort of have the same thing, except we're not randomizing people. We're looking at people who live in areas where, say, they fluoridate water, or they have higher levels of background fluoride in water, and people who live in areas that don't fluoridate water or have lower levels. And in that case, what you see is that when the levels are lower, these harms to like the intelligence as measured by IQ, these harms to behavior stuff like, does the kid have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder? Does the kid have problems with just focusing, schoolwork, things like that? when the doses of fluoride are lower, you have less of that. And as the doses of fluoride increase, you have more of that. And that's you do not, I mean, you have to be crazy to not like pay attention to that. I mean, that's very compelling evidence outside of a clinical trial.
The other side will point to a lot of studies and say what you said, there are weaknesses in them, but then go further and say really none of them are any good or replicable, the ones that make these claims, and that there are many studies on the other side saying that there is no risk that comes with fluoride.
Yeah. So the fact is, I know it's the fervid commitment to defending, fluoride is it's not admirable. Actually, it's actually sad. But the fact is, yes, there are some studies that don't show a relationship, and that's true. And this is why it's important to be able to exercise judgment and to have good judgment. And the majority of studies do show a relationship. The relationship happens to be a dose-response relationship. It is poor judgment to ignore that. People can do it, like the American Dental Association. They can do that, but it is poor judgment. It would be akin to, I'm trying to think of some other scenario where someone might do it, but it's poor judgment. It's just poor judgment.
Can you tell us what Florida has done in terms of fluoride added to the water?
Yeah. So most Floridians, until the legislation that the Governor DeSantis signed, 2 months ago or so, and was part of Commissioner Wilton Simpson's Florida agriculture bill, most Floridians consumed fluoridated water in Florida. And through the efforts of multiple people, including the work I did with Dr. Ashley Mallon at the University of Florida to provide some education to county commissioners in different counties and different cities, and to answer questions, to be a resource. And frankly, I also have to, a substantial part of the credit also goes to the county commissioners. It was very interesting to the experience of really going around the state, because you saw these different dynamics. You had some county commissioners and groups that were afraid because they don't want to go against the American Dental Association. They don't want to go against the American Medical Association. In the face of data, they don't want to do that, and they would back off. And you saw others who, despite not wanting to go against these authoritative bodies, you just could not deny or could not just ignore the information that was in front of them. So we got to see all those dynamics and the voting and all that. And so cities and counties, even before the legislation was signed, many of them moved to remove fluoride. Miami-Dade County was the biggest one. Their Commissioner, Roberto Gonzalez, just a great guy. His efforts moved people. I'll just tell you real briefly, one of the most beautiful things there was that it's Miami-Dade, so everything's fancier, and the meeting hall's fancier, everything's fancier, lots of cameras, all this crazy stuff. And Commissioner Roberto Gonzalez, he basically was able to convince enough people, both Republicans and Democrats, to vote to remove it. Their mayor then their mayor vetoed the commissioners, and the commissioners came back to vote again. And they were able to be successful by a margin of one vote. And that one vote, interestingly enough, I don't want to call the guy out, but he's a Democrat. And I could see him in the meeting that we were in struggling over the decision. And it was just a beautiful thing that he made that change and voted to remove it with the other commissioners. So many cities and counties have made individual decisions to remove it, and now at the state level, it's got to be gone for everyone.
At Arizona State University, we've made online education better, smarter, and more personalized so you can go further in your aspiring field.
I decided to pursue medicine once I realized that ASU did have the online program for biological sciences. You're still required to learn the same curriculum. You're still being tested on the same content that anyone would be tested on in person. The comprehensiveness of the program prepared me so well for medical school.
Explore over 350 plus programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
So as we sit here today, it is not legal for cities and counties in Florida to add fluoride to the water.
It is illegal. That's correct. It is illegal for cities and counties to add fluoride to water currently.
One of the big arguments some of the dental experts make has to do with what will happen if cavities aren't prevented with fluoride in the drinking water. And they point to photographs of children with terrible infections in their teeth and their mouth that extends, to their face. And more children, they say, will be hospitalized and need dental treatments in an emergency room and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Are you afraid that will happen when we look 5 years down the road? We're going to have a sicker population?
Yeah, it's one of the strategies they use. So what they won't tell you is that, even before any of these efforts in Florida, something like a third, maybe a quarter of Floridians lived in areas without fluoridated water, and their teeth are not falling out over there. So this whole idea that, the floor is just going to come out from underneath this in terms of dental health is not supported by any data. There's no data to support that. None whatsoever. There's no data in Florida to support that. There's no data from studies that have been done to support that. Dental health is very important. And one of the things that we're doing, and I think is very important, is really to promote education about dental health. I will tell you, as a sort of personal anecdote, if you will. So I was born in Nigeria. My parents moved here when I was about 5 years old, and they were really into school, but not a lot of dental education. So unfortunately, I developed a mouth full of cavities. By the way, drinking fluoridated water, I'm sure, in Georgia and Louisiana, but I developed a mouth full of cavities, unfortunately. And the bridge, it was all about education. Like if my parents had known and taught me to floss, and, Joe, you shouldn't have snacks at night and then go to bed, with like all the sugar in your mouth or carbohydrates or whatever, I wouldn't have a ton of cavities. And there are a lot of families out there that don't have that education. So that's something we're working on to boost. But these concerns, they're completely bunk. It's totally bogus. Like nothing like that is going to happen. The fluoride in water is not the thing that's going to make the difference between good dental health in Florida and bad dental health in Florida.
What do you see on the horizon in the rest of the country as other states and municipalities are looking at this issue? And is there a federal effort? I mean, I know the EPA has been ordered to take a look, but I don't think they've done anything. And there may be some conflict among the agencies up there as to what should be done. So what do you see on the horizon?
Yeah. Well, so I think we need to keep our pedal to the metal, because the American Dental Association, other groups, I hate the word misinformation, by the way. I just have a reaction to it. But they are spouting a lot of nonsense still. And there was a lot of attention on the issue when we were working on it. Nationally, there was a lot of attention on it. And now, the battle is won for now. But there's not as much of a counter voice. So we definitely need to keep the pedal to the metal. Other states, leaders in those states should absolutely be pushing forward with it. I suspect those efforts are underway. I have not heard much yet, but I suspect that's underway, and that needs to keep happening. At the federal level, I'm not sure what's happening there, because my understanding is that the EPA has actually appealed the ruling of this federal judge to regulate. So I'm not sure what's happening there. I would not have expected that the EPA would have done that. I would expect that they would regulate this, this additive in water. So hopefully that will resolve itself. I'm hopeful that will resolve itself. But I do anticipate that eventually, on a nationwide level, the EPA is not going to be permitting municipalities to add fluoride. It's just, when you look at the totality of the evidence, it's really insane to continue doing it. It's just far too risky in populations that are, children, pregnant women, that we hold to a higher level of safety.
Dental groups ideally are looking out for our dental health. And if you want to be cynical, would make more money if what they say is true, people aren't using fluoride and there's worse dental health, more people have to go to the dentist and get work. What do you think is the motivation of dental groups who are saying we have to keep the fluoride?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we have this indoctrination syndrome in healthcare. And I wish that they were financially motivated, because it's almost easier to work with that. But instead, the impression I have is that it's really more of a doctrine. It's really more of almost a religious fervent belief system. In medicine, we have the same things. For example, there are analogous statements one could make about vaccinations, for example, where there's just people just believe in it, and it transcends financial interests, it transcends common sense, it transcends literally the evidence that is in front of them. It's just this doctrine, this indoctrination, and this belief system. And my impression is that that's a component of what's happening, almost as if, I made a statement once at one of these I think it was a press conference with Governor DeSantis, and I described the way the dental community, or members of the dental community, not all of them, but many members of the dental community, hold on to fluoridation like Linus, and in Charlie Brown, and how he holds on to his blanket. It really is a similar dynamic, and it's just like they're just holding on to it, and that's where that is at least a component. I will tell you that the impression I get from the American Dental Association is that they are also very concerned about their reputation, and they're concerned that yielding ground on some of these things, some of these practices that they've encouraged for a long time. I mentioned amalgam use, which, by the way, everyone, is mostly mercury. It's actually not so much silver, it's mostly mercury. And yes, I'm talking about the same mercury that's a poison. But the way they hold on to this, my impression is that they're also sort of trying to do reputation protection. But it's sick. You gotta take care of people.
For more on this story and to hear what fluoride supporters have to say, you can watch Full Measure Sunday, November 16th. To find out how, go to SharylAttkisson.com and click the Full Measure tab to find a station and time near you. You could also choose instead to go to fullmeasure.news around 11 o'clock Eastern Time Sunday morning and watch the program live, or go to fullmeasure.news most anytime thereafter and see a replay. You can also, if it's easier for you, go to our unadvertised YouTube channel, Full Measure with Sharyl Attkisson, and watch not only this program after it posts after Sunday, November 16th, but you can watch replays of our other programs. We have so much unique reporting on very important subjects, good old-fashioned news reporting that you don't see enough of anymore. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast and that you'll consider leaving us a fantastic review, sharing this with your friends, and subscribing. And check out my other podcast, the Sharyl Attkisson Podcast. If you haven't already had a chance to read my latest bestseller, Follow the Science, How Big Pharma Misleads, Obscures, and Prevails, there's no time like the present. Proceeds support independent reporting causes. The same goes for sales from my website. Go to SharylAttkisson.com and click the store tab for some exciting products with great slogans designed for independent thinkers like you, such as, I need to find some new conspiracy theories. All my old ones came true. And do your own research, make up your own mind. Think for yourself.